highway to the Torah zone took me right into the Torah zone. Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. We're going to be viewing something, but I wanted to take a few minutes and just kind of re-greet you as we've just gotten back from Indiana. And I had a lot of you take an interest in a family event that was pretty important to us. And so I thought, although I couldn't provide any wedding cake, I'd at least provide a few pictures and talk about that just briefly. Uh, and let you in on a blessed event for us. Now, I'm still recovering time zone wise, and I have to admit, while the wedding was wonderful, my 58-year-old back didn't like the mattress quite as much as it used to, just because I'm getting older. So I don't adjust as well. Everything's getting back to normal here. Tomorrow night, we will be doing, all right, some really neat comments out there. Yes, it was awesome. And so I jokingly say that I have gained a son and lost a workout and coffee buddy at the same time. Um, Let me show you a few pictures here. Now, this is not the normal sort of YouTube thing, right? And then we're going to go into a message that I gave in Brooklyn. I was blessed to give. And then tomorrow night, I probably will be airing something again because I'm still trying to get everything together. And I have also some things to do to get back together. We're pushing for the completion of my dissertation in December. And so I'm just trying to get everything back together again. Shout out to Warrior Woman. Nate's already here. He's, you know, I saw his blue wrench before any other blue wrench. You will like it. It's Parsha teaching. I'll explain more when we get there. But first, let me show you some really beautiful people and talk to you a little about that. What you see in the back when you do see this come up is going to be a canopy. That's called a chuppah. And as part of that chuppah, when you do and see, is a talit that was my grandfather's. And we did some things with Jewish symbolism. There you go. For you that are watching YouTube right now, you saw the chuppah and you see it in the back. That's Pastor Ron. You see another look at the chuppah, and I explained that. I had the chance to do that. That's the service. It went through a lot of transformations. That's me practicing with the talit. Now, we did something untraditional. I actually transferred the talit to Jordan, and that was a really cool thing. It's not directly Jewishly traditional in a Jewish wedding, but it's a traditional for us. We started a new tradition, and I think that's really worthwhile. That's them under the chuppah. I took out all the pictures of us seeing where Jordan proposed to Gabby, and trying to be, but we did end up around Indianapolis. So now you know what the Ashkenazi Talit looks like. Sorry about the sideways picture. There are at least two pictures here that Streamlabs doesn't think belong the direction that I think they belong. So that's kind of a start out there. Um, they're moving on with their lives, and we're excited for them. Um, I've known Jordan for a while. Just by way, I think Gabby and Jordan got to meet each other in a much better way. When he came to do an internship, his church set up, it was an apologetics internship, and they got to know each other a little better. So I jokingly could think to myself that apologetics had a hand in this whole thing, but it's a small hand. The main thing was these two wonderful young people and my other wonderful children who got to come back with me. I still have them back here, so that's a real blessing too. Let me move on and kind of get that. I can have some more wedding pictures in the near future. This is all I could process at the time and work in. There was just so much going on, and it was just a really incredible week. I can honestly say the gospel was part of the ceremony to a great degree. Between some of my comments, clearly they both shared their testimony at the wedding. Why is that important to me? Because my 91-year-old dad was there, and he got to hear some things. And Jordan gave his testimony. The gospel was proclaimed, and even through the symbolism that was Jewish symbolism, I tied it to the concepts of covenant and then the talit to the fact that we have a Messiah who is our place of provision and protection. So let's just say it was really part of things. So that's where we are there. I do want to take a few minutes here and welcome our newest subscribers. Yes, even while I was in Indiana, God was working and brought in a few new subscribers. Alfred Scott and Brendan Brown, I got notification have subscribed to the station. So I don't see them in the house tonight, but greetings to Alfred Scott and Brendan Brown. I make a big deal out of this because we're a community and I'm excited when people join it. Now, that doesn't mean that no one can join who has a different opinion. We welcome conversation, we welcome dialogue, but it is always great to have new subscribers. So when I switch to this, because of the way this is set up, okay, Warrior Woman's doing a great job. She is, there is no moderator of the week, but I got to tell you, I did notice Warrior Woman doing that. You guys are all great, but that's a really cool thing to do. And I appreciate it. So we will be back to moderator of the week, and I'm paying attention. And by the way, this is just to spotlight the hard work you guys do. So I don't intend to exclude anyone. I'm just encouraging you, as you're such an encouragement to me. We work together and we encourage each other. And so I just want to recognize that. And, you know, I won't be looking to exclude people. I will be looking to include people. This is an inclusive thing. So, let me get to the split screen. Now, I have to let you know that once I punch split screen, the actual message I gave will start complete. There will be a little bit of a pickup where there'll be some quiet, here's some clicking around. I agree. She is a premium mod, and so when I get back to mod of the week, I will definitely be looking at that. When I get to this, there'll be a little bit of a gap here where the churches, because we were in Brooklyn and at Shalom Brooklyn, so you're going to hear some clicking and stuff as the sound guys are getting me on, and then you'll hear the message start. So I'm going to get that going. It'll take a few seconds to get to you. It should sound pretty good. And then afterwards, I'm going to look at a few less comments because we're still kind of recovering here. But we will, you know, I will be paying some attention and doing some shout out at the end. And then it will be time to kind of begin to collapse here in Arizona as we try to catch ourselves up with the time zone and everything. So here we go.
Two things that I grew up, well, two things that I love. I shouldn't say grew up loving. One is teaching. The other is old TV programs. And I remember in our house we had this big old black and white TV. This is before flat screen or any of that sort of thing. Big, huge thing with the the vacuum tubes in the back that used to heat up. And I used to watch that thing. I knew, I was nerdy. I knew Captain Kirk's middle name, and still do. And just grew up around these things. And a show that I remember was called The Twilight Zone. I don't know if any of you remember The Twilight Zone. And I thought about what would it be like if this parsha was an episode of The Twilight Zone. You have a universe of sight and sound, of mere sight and sound, of mere perception. You are entering a world of peace and love and joy. You have just entered the Torah zone. I'm going to be doing a little clicking, so there'll be a few things different. Click. Our episode tonight, and picture if you will, an ancient people that have been wandering for roughly 40 years. And now Moses is giving them their final directions because he will not be entering that land. His last opportunity to go ahead and impart all that he wants them to know before they enter the land. Click. Okay. Submitted for your approval. Having a little trouble. Submitted for your approval. God, in his kindness, it may read a little different on your TV screens. That's the problem with black and white and color, right? It looks different. Has provided in his great love a place that is a solution to the problem of blessing and cursing. I should have put myself a little closer. Okay. All right.
Don't mind me.
Don't mind the man behind the booth. Okay. I think that's doubled. Just click it, Bobby. Just go ahead and click it. Okay. As you enter the Twilight Zone tonight, you see signs before you. You enter in and you see the various divisions of the text. And you see the first division that talks about blessing and cursing. And you see the second that ends up talking about a place of sacrifice. False worship is totally disallowed. Bobby, can I move this down? I know it's a big problem, but my bifocals are not working. I'm looking through the top, and I don't see anybody.
We've done this before.
Okay.
We used to be on the floor, actually.
Okay.
Here we go.
We're bringing him closer. Thank you.
For they shall not be broken.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you so much. You're out there now.
We can see you better.
I can see you better. Okay.
So that was a commercial break, right?
That was a commercial break. Now back to our program. Yeah. So, false prophets and tempters of idolatry are disallowed. You move through the next sign, and the dietary laws and customs related to death are given. The next sign brings you to tithing or giving to the Lord. And then is the year of Jubilee within the zone. Click. Finally, there is the law of the firstborn and the restating of laws related to the Passover. And finally, there's discussion of the 3 pilgrim feasts. Click. Now, at that first sign, you saw the relationship of blessing and cursing. And these concepts are important to the Torah zone. They're terribly important, and they're repeated over and over again. Sometimes you run into reruns, don't you? And so these are sort of like reruns, and they're important concepts. And so this is where we're going to start tonight in the Torah zone. Click. Divine reward and punishment are very much a part of Jewish thinking. And although Judaism has not been big on statements of faith, lest you think that Jewish people never ever thought about what they believed and sat around kind of never having any ideas about how to summarize this, I'm here to tell you that really Judaism is not merely just merely deed. There actually has been a little creed, a little bit of discussion about what we believe. And so I listed an early scholar there, and he attempted to come up with some sort of creed in the the beginning of the 1900s. And you will notice that reward and punishment is a part of that, isn't it? And so this is a very early attempt. For those of you who know what the 13 Articles of Faith are, this predates the 13 Articles of Faith.
Whoa.
And this is one of the earliest attempts. And what I want you to see is blessing and cursing are very much a part of the thinking here. They're in the earliest attempts to figure out what this is all about and to codify it in some way. Blessing and cursing are a part of that. These are important concepts in the Torah, and they made it into the common discussions around theological things, although they didn't call it theology. And so that's what I'm here to end up sharing with you. Where is it found? The Shema. Now, we didn't do all 3 paragraphs. We did that first paragraph, but you know there are 2 other paragraphs to the Shema? And I put the second one up there. And the rabbi said that the concepts of divine reward and punishment should be part of the Shema. I'm going to use a term from theology of the Siddur, rubric, which means that section of the Siddur. And so, really, I don't necessarily always go through all 3 paragraphs, but I realize they're there. And so that's actually the second paragraph, with a little help from some software. But I want you to see blessing is implied here, right? You get the rains if you serve Him. You get blessed if you serve Him. You get the things you need if you serve Him. The grass of the field, and you'll eat and be satisfied. But there's a but there, isn't there? Because also cursing is discussed. Beware lest your heart be deceived. Why? Click. This is what happens. If you get deceived, you turn away and you serve other gods, and what happens? The anger of Hashem will blaze against you, and He will restrain the heavens so there's what? No rain. You don't get what you need. The ground will not yield its produce, and you will swiftly be banished from the goodly land that Hashem gives you. By the way, this is in Deuteronomy. They haven't even entered the land yet. And these concepts are being drilled into their head over and over and over again. And that's where this parashah starts. That's where our episode of the Twilight Zone really starts, is with these concepts of blessing and cursing. So as we enter this zone of righteousness, peace, and joy, what does it start with? Blessing. That sounds good. Well, we're jumping ahead. We're jumping ahead. But there's good news and there's bad news. If there's going to be good news, by the way, there has to be bad news. Because the good news is good in light of the fact that there's bad news if you don't pay attention to the good news, right? The good news is if you cross when the light is proper, even in New York City, you probably will not be run over. The bad news is if you jump in front of a car in New York City, you probably will be run over. So there's good news and there's bad news. But this is actually a part of the Siddur. And my grandfather would pray all 3 paragraphs several times a day. These things echoed in his head. And they were taught to me. And they echoed in my head when I used to go with him to shul or synagogue. Click. What does it mean to bless? We're going to talk about the main Hebrew word. There are a few Hebrew words used, but the one you used this morning, remember hearing Baruch a lot? That's actually from that verb to bless, and it has the idea of to bless. And there's discussion over whether it has the idea of to kneel, whether it's related to that idea. And the reason some people don't like that is because it's only used 3 times that way. That's okay. How many times do you have to hear something? But generally, when we look at the definition of word, we see the way it's used the most times. But that doesn't preclude lesser meanings from being used, right?
Right.
And so there's a discussion about that, but it has the idea of to bless. A bracha is a blessing. Now, I have a problem with kneeling. If I want to give something to my kids, I have 5. They were one time shorter than I am. Not so much anymore. Discipline them when they're young, because when they're taller than you, it gets harder. So you want to go ahead and take care of that when you have the height advantage. But if I wanted to give them something, what did I have to do? I had to bend over. I had to kneel to give them something. So I don't have any problem at all with an extended meaning to something. And so though it's only 3 times, I'm not going to make a big argument over it. We know what it means, but we can see a picture behind that verb, can't we? And
Kneeling is a sign of submission to God.
well, we do it.
Yeah.
Okay? When he does it, he's not submitting to us. Okay? And I didn't submit to my children. I was not a Dr. Spock kind of parent. We had a rule in our family, this is not a democracy, this is a benign dictatorship. So, yes, we bless him. But he first did what? He first knelt to us, didn't he? So we can kneel because he stooped down. Click. So how do we understand that? Blessing would be the car I've always wanted, right? Blessing would be the lottery. Blessing would be an unlimited Starbucks card. See me later, I take donations. Okay, is that really what God means by blessing? No. We had a fun time in the program I'm in, where we talked about an idea that actually jumped and connected to a Torah idea in the first century, eudaimonia. Do you know our Constitution? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Okay. Our founding fathers actually were familiar with this concept of good that produces well-being. And you know what? The interesting thing is, not that I'm getting Western, but you know, the reality is people bumped heads and they found things in common. You're having coffee with somebody and you're a Jewish person in the first century, and you pick up your copy of something that's great, and you find occasional things where people bumped into truth as bumping into somebody on the subway and found out it was a friend. Hi, I haven't seen you for a while. And this kind of happened. And when we use the term pursuit of happiness, that's not the way. It doesn't mean what people think it means anymore. It means like blessing. It means having everything necessary to be able to prosper and have a life as God intended. That's what blessing is really about. Okay, you can give me things I want that aren't healthy for me. My kids wanted things that might not be good for them. Daddy, can I have 6 chocolate bars before I turn in? No, you can't. Because we'll be peeling you off the walls. It would not be good for you to bless you with a load of Hershey's bars 10 minutes before you're going to sleep. That would not be blessing them. It also would not be blessing me. Okay? That's not what blessing is about. God wants us to live a certain way according to how He's designed us. And blessing has to do with Him giving the things we need because we're human beings. But not necessarily everything we want. Because what we want can turn out to be a curse. And so blessing isn't always getting what you want. Cursing. Anticipation is a beautiful thing. What is cursing? Well, the Hebrew word has to make light of something, but cursing, as we look at how it plays out in Torah, has to do with God withdrawing things. Ultimately, withdrawing to the point where you're left with nothing but all the nastiness that you can possibly have inside, all the junk, all the garbage, withdrawing light and beauty and truth and everything that human beings are supposed to have, in addition to the 3 square meals we like and everything else. And God just withdraws. He pulls back those good things that He would give in cursing. Okay? Now, it doesn't have to be a time release thing. Okay? It can become a permanent thing that culminates in ultimate cursing, where I don't have those things. And for me, growing up, a lot of times when I heard evangelicals, eternal separation was all about the temperature. You know, they describe it in terms of heat. And they describe it in terms of fire. We had electricity. We didn't do a lot of open fires. Did camping only in Boy Scouts. They describe it that way. But some images that strike me that felt like horrible. My parents took me, and they go to the store, and I went to the back where the TVs were. See what type of kid I was? And so I'd look at the screens, and they left without me. I didn't know it. And about 20 minutes later, I'm looking for my parents, and I can't find them. And I remember the feeling of separation and abandonment and alienation from the things that I needed. I needed the protection of my parents. I needed the provision my parents had. I needed to be able to get back home, and I was separated. I was lost. And I remember that feeling. The good that I had enjoyed through my parents had been broken because they were not there anymore. And so that cursing, which starts in this life, can ultimately become a permanent condition. Forever deprivation, forever increasing guilt, forever the darkness of loss and regret. I remember a poem. I used to write more poetry than I do now. The saddest words of tongue and pen are these three words: it might have been. And I've always remembered that poem, and to me, that felt like cursing. I know my parents weren't cursing me. They were just a little absent-minded and didn't know where I went. But it felt like that. The deprivation of the good, the loss of all that I needed as a kid, all of a sudden, with no way to figure out how to fix it. How horrible is this? How absolutely ghastly a feeling. The other was more in terms of the loss of the good that comes through mere relationship. Let me explain what that felt like. Me and my grandfather were terribly close. And I grew up around musicals. TV, musicals, plays. And so there was a little musical. I don't know that I recommend it now. The music's wonderful. The plot's a little weird. It's called Gigi. And I remember the musical Gigi with this wonderful voice of Maurice Chevalier singing with his French accent. I remember it well, and he didn't remember anything well, and he's being corrected, and I remember that. And it was on, and it was the night before Hebrew school, and I wanted to stay up, and my grandfather lived with us, and my dad, and so I wanted to stay up. My dad said I could stay up. My grandfather said, no, you have Hebrew school, you have cheder in the morning. Okay, you need to go to sleep. And I sided with my dad because I wanted to see Gigi. My grandfather wouldn't speak to me for 2 weeks. And I remember following him around and sitting at his feet, wanting the relationship to be repaired and not knowing what in the world to do. There was deprivation of all the good that he didn't know Yeshua, he didn't know Messiah, but he brought me into contact with Jewish things and things about our God, and there was this loss all of a sudden of the good that he brought in my life. He was the one that taught me neat little poems and clever sayings that I still remember. He was the one that spent time hanging around with his only grandson. My cousins are all female, firstborn in my family, and he hung around with me. Sometimes when I'm around Izzy, I can almost hear my grandfather. That's not a comment on your age, Izzy. But I remember that, and I remember that feeling of deprivation, of alienation. And in a sense, because of my grandfather's anger, there was a feeling of curse. It was finally one of my cousins that said, get with the program. The kid's been sitting at your feet for 2 weeks now. You think you could give a little bit of forgiveness? What's wrong with you? But I remember that. I want you to get a feeling, because the cursing in Devarim is corporate. It's for the nation, and it has to do with grass and wheat and stuff that you buy at the grocery store. And so you don't think about it anymore. But those things to them were signs of non-deprivation. We're not lacking. They were true signs, and so I want you to get a picture of what it could be for you. this morning. What blessing could be where you have what you need and you have what human beings should have to be Ben Adam, to be mensches, to be real human beings. And to know what cursing is in deprivation, in being made light of in the sense of becoming just that much less because you lack the things that would make for you to be more. And to get that feeling and to know what that feels like and what that means. And so there's blessing and there's cursing mentioned in this parashah. So next slide. So my grandfather would say, so new, why cursing? We talk about a God who loves people, don't we? Do you know sometimes when I talk to individuals who are of a more modern mindset, they have a terrible time with this whole thing. Talk to a real secular individual about things like this, and they sort of picture God as the great candy dispenser in the sky. They really sort of do. They don't get how there could be a downside. How could they picture him as an indulgent individual who gives them what they want, and surely with God there would be no cursing. So what's with the cursing? God refuses to be an enabler. It's not quite the Twilight Zone, but it felt like it when I worked in mental health. I kept waiting for the music, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, when I was working with some of my clients. And boy, were they in the outer limits. Oh, but that's another show. And I remember working with them, and we had a client. His favorite game was destroy the video so that I can get a new one. Because every time he wrecked his video machine, the state would give him a new video machine. Your tax dollars at work. And he would just trash this thing and go in and have a temper tantrum, and then he'd just file for a new video machine. He would unscrew his bed and come out to me and tell me, my mattress is on the floor, I've taken my bed apart, put it together for me. His father would come once a week, the ultimate enabling, and ask him if he had behaved. Hey, that's okay, that almost works. If he had behaved, and he would say yes. The father would never ask me. Okay? He'd ask, this is somebody with a lower IQ, and he knew the word yes, because the yes resulted in $20. Someone should give me $20 every time I'm nice. This could be a wonderful thing. Okay? And he would give no expenses for this young adult. No expenses. He worked at a greenhouse. I worked at a greenhouse. I worked at keeping him doing something and keeping the greenhouse going. And I remember that. And so he would get the $20. See, his father was enabling him. He was blessing him for bad behavior. He was teaching him how to be a problem. And he was getting better and better and better at it as time went on. God refuses to ultimately back. He may permit, but he will not ultimately back that which is contrary to his character. He won't do it. He will not violate himself. In fact, for me, the moral center of the universe is God. Everything stems from who God is. That's why we worship. That's why we bless him for bread and for the things, because we realize he's the source. He's the ultimate moral source as well as the ultimate physical source. And so, why cursing? Because God won't back the children of Israel in the sense of giving them everything he promised. Now, I want to be careful. Okay? God keeps his promises ultimately, but he doesn't, like the indulgent father, give 20 for breaking the VCR. Okay? And in Deuteronomy, God says, look, there's a covenant. This is my land. I'm giving it to you, and it will operate correctly when you are being what I made you to be, but it is not going to yield the things it's supposed to yield because I'm not going to further idolatry. I love you, but I don't love idolatry. I love you, but I don't love you being less than you're supposed to be. I love you, but I refuse to let you turn yourself into something that is horrible. Okay? And it wasn't like today with a pluralistic society, like they were just visiting another congregation for the day. It's okay. They're visiting the Baal congregation today. How nice. They like the style of worship better. Okay? It wasn't like that. Paganism was a terrible, horrible thing where people did nasty, horrible things in the name of horrible things. Because I won't even call them deities. They're not deities. And so they had horrible things. And God said, no, I won't enable that. I won't bless that. That's not abundant living. I will not give you the things that prosper abundant living when you're going to use them for lousy living. I won't do that. I won't violate myself. I won't violate who you are supposed to be and what you were made to be. Now you have a God who wants to maximize. He's gracious. He wants to give. He wants to maximize the things that we need as human beings. But he won't violate himself. Is there a solution? There's a problem, right? Can you see the problem? There's a problem. Is there a solution? There's a solution. Click. I hope. Did it click? Ah, yes. Yes. He set up sacred space. He set up a place so he could maximize blessing, live among the people. And by the way, where God is, there's blessing, right? Where God is, there's the things we need, because we need him. And with him comes everything else. And he set up space, sacred space. And I remember sitting with Noel Rabinowitz. And aside from his 1-minute stand-up on Jewish Christmas names, which I can still do for you, which is hysterically funny, he drew stick figures. Noel was a great professor, but his stick figures, they were interesting. So he drew stick figures, and he drew the temple up, the tabernacle up, and he said, how many of you think that this was for eternal personal salvation? Have a nice day. There were 2 ways to do this, and he said no, and then he drew funny squiggly lines. I kept wondering, is this going to be on the test? Okay? And he said, no, this was so God could dwell among them and continue to bless them. This was sacred space to deal with the problem of their not being what they need to be, and God not going to enable that sort of conduct and not going to act according to his nature. This was like the corporate sin filter that dealt with this whole problem. And so he created sacred space where he could dwell and he could deal with this. And he set up a solution. And that's where we are at the beginning of chapter 12. There's a flow to this. I've given you blessings. I've given you curses. Now you have a problem. Now I present a solution. Solution. God's going to choose a place for his name. Now the tabernacle was the solution while they were wandering. Should they be wandering forever? No, they're supposed to inherit something. You're not wondering? We're going to make the space permanent. We're going to give it locations in Google so you can find it and get there, because you need to do that. And so God set up the sacred space originally, and then he set up the space for the sacred space eventually. And so he tells them that you're not going to do like them. You're going to come to the place that I've set up to deal with the blessing and cursing problem. To deal with my desire to bless you, to be generous to you, but not to violate who I am, and not to allow you to become something you were never supposed to be. And I will dwell among you there, and this whole system will allow me to. Click. Okay. What about today? Do we have space? Do we have sacred space? I love Israel. I love going there. But please don't think that things are exactly the same. Okay? I don't want you going there trying to find things. Don't be, trying to do that. In fact, a sign that we shouldn't swing chickens anymore. Sometimes Orthodox Jews will swing a chicken because it's inhumane. Just give money. I thought that's an interesting solution. Just give money. How much should I make my check for? How much does a swing chicken cost? Okay? Is there space? You know what? The great news today is there is sacred space. But not the way there was sacred space back then. Will there be space again? Yeah. The space I'm going to talk about and the space that God used to have as far as a physical place in Jerusalem, they're going to be combined. And the sacred space will overlap with the sacred space in a unique way. So I'm going to take you somewhere that I never thought as a Jewish kid I would ever find to be terribly Jewish. I found Matthew was Jewish, and then I thought, well, John was kind of weird. I knew some Bills. I knew some Jacks. I didn't know too many Jewish Johns, but it's okay. And then I started looking into John, and I said, wow, this is pretty incredible stuff. I want you to look at the language here. Now, people debate when exactly this was written, because that's what theologians do. They have coffee, and they discuss when things are written. Okay? But here's the thing. A lot, and there's good reason to believe that this was written much later than the other three Gospels. In fact, we say the other three Gospels are synoptic. You're looking through glasses that look the same, and John is different. Probably written. If this was indeed written after 70 A.D., this is like dynamic stuff here. Okay? And John confused me. That's why I started my journey with the triunity. But here's the thing. I love you to look at the language here. 1:14. Okay? I want you to look at the language here. Now we have the word became flesh, but what did the word that became flesh do? It dwelt. It shekand. It dwelt. Like God dwelt in the temple. Like there was this sacred space that solved the problem where God dwelt and He personally took care of the problem of being who He is and wanting to be kind and generous and love the people, but not wanting to enable them to corrupt themselves and lose who they were supposed to be. In order to do that, ultimately, that sacred space became a person. He dwelt. He shekinah'd. It's like the Shekinah. Oh, I'm just getting into stuff that I'm getting excited about these days. Like the Shekinah dwelt among us, and this sacred space, this dwelling, was a person. The tabernacle, the temple, became a person. There's sacred space. There is a solution to the blessing and cursing, because I'll tell you that at 53, 613, anything is hard for me to remember. Okay? And I was talking to the head of the Phoenix Historical Society, and he said, why do you believe Jesus is the Messiah? And I said, look, I can't keep 613 commandments. I can't remember 613 commandments, depending on how I'm doing that morning. That's a lot to handle. And they're not easy things if you really look at what's there. They're good things. The problem is we aren't as good as they are. So there's a goodness gap, right? The sacred space became a person. And we saw the sacred space as a person, full of who God is. Click. Now, how do you get into the space? How do you get into the space? Now, for most of the people here, I've been out. Most of you are sitting in the space. We'll talk about staying in the space. But it is possible that there is someone here who is not in the space. And you got to be in the zone. You got to be in the space. I used to think that born again was some really strange concept that Gentiles made up. You know that? And I love talking to people about the Brit Halev, the circumcision of the heart. And so you get into the space because you end up approaching God, dealing with the need. You got a blessing cursing problem. Okay, you're doing stuff to get cursed. You might be sincere, but you're gonna do something that deserves cursing sooner or later. You are. You're going to violate the standard. You're going to end up messing that up. And so you're going to have a cursing problem. And so you have to come to Messiah. Why? Because Messiah does heart surgery. Amen. Without anesthesia. Amen. Okay? And so he circumcises the heart. He gives the Brit Halev. That's how you get into space. You got to get into space. Because you need to connect to the sacred space to deal with the blessing-cursing problem. And it's not as though God's being tight-fisted. It's as though you're becoming something you never were created to be. Okay? How about being in the space? I like this stuff. I didn't stick it there. If you have your phones, first of all, put them on vibrate. Second of all, turn to John 15. I have to tell you something about the language here. John is very particular in what he's doing. If you read Isaiah, you find out that Israel is compared to a vine. There we go. Israel's compared to a vine. She was supposed to be a channel of blessing. But Yeshua here says something really interesting. And it's right up there. I am the true vine. All that Israel was meant to be is ultimately fulfilled in Yeshua. As Israel was to be God's vineyard, so Yeshua is the true vine. He is the ultimate epitome. He is the ultimate, I like what Bobby said, the ultimate Israelite. He is the ultimate vine. And the Father is the vine dresser. And you can click, or I can keep reading, or we can do both. Right. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Okay. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that we may bear more fruit. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I really believe God can keep those he saves, but I also believe that we have a responsibility. Okay? And when you solve the connection between divine sovereign responsibility, tell me you can write a doctoral paper. Because for years, theologians have been debating this, and I'm not going to get there. You are already clean. You're already kosher because of the word that I've spoken to you. But what does this tell us about staying there? Okay? You're clean. There it is. There it is. Abide in me and I in you. A branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you. You have to stay in the sacred space. And I like how we ended up doing this week. Some people are just visiting, but we talked about getting worship into us and the overflow and staying in the space and being in the space. And you know what? In the ancient Israel, the tabernacle, when it became the temple, stayed in one place. When the temple was built, did it move around when I moved around? God stayed in one place. You know, the people came near and far. They moved away. And that's the way it is in our lives. If you're not in the space, you have to get in the space. But if you're in the space, that doesn't absolve you of anything. You have to do after that, oh good, I came to the space, now my life is my own, yeah, yay. No. That's called spiritual deformation. We have spiritual formation, we have spiritual deformation, okay? That's spiritual deformation, okay? You have to stay in the space. And so you have to abide. You're the one who moves away when distance occurs, not God. God is not leaving his universe. Okay, you're the one who moves, and you need to abide. We need to keep coming back to that ultimate tabernacle, that ultimate sacred space, and we need to live in that sacred space. Shabbat is about sacred time. This is about sacred space. We need to keep returning to that sacred space. We have to admit when we moved. You can't go back until you realize you've moved, right? Okay? You have to turn around. There's a whole Hebrew word for that, right? Sometimes that's the hardest part, because we like to think we're perfectly consistent. We're very inconsistent. And we do little things, and sometimes we're not even aware. We're not even aware that a 5% difference over a mile leads to a lot of distance. Okay? And so we need to come back. Time to come back to the tabernacle again, the ultimate tabernacle. We need to return. And there's prayer, and there's confession, and you know what? It's always there waiting for us. He's always there waiting for us, because the sacred space is a person.
Amen.
And so this parsha is so beautiful because it lets us know that God wants to bless them, but not on our terms, on his. that he refuses to let us become something he's not. And now we have a problem, and in that problem is a sacred space, and the sacred space has become a person, and that sacred space can be returned to. But if you're not in the sacred space, you need heart surgery. You need to see somebody. You need to get heart surgery. The man behind the curtain there, to quote the Wizard of Oz, you can see him, Joseph, there's other staff around. Whoever God would lead you to. I'm not here to tell you that, but you need to get in the sacred space. If you're here and you're in the sacred space, and you've probably enjoyed a bit of a mountaintop if you've come to Shalom, Brooklyn. Now you have to go back to the valley. You have to go back to the sacred space in the valley of everyday life. And so I want to encourage you to keep going back to that sacred space when you get off your plane. And stick with that. Because Shalom Brooklyn for the first week may have ended, but you know what? God hasn't ended. He's going to be busy with you where you are. And so you get or you stay, but whatever you do, you get in contact with that sacred space. And this Parsha shows that God has a solution to a problem because of who He is and because of what He's provided. The ultimate blessing is found in the sacred space.
Amen. If I want to stay in the sacred space, I better put some more money in the meter.
Did I need to turn it over to you, or?
So,
Thank you.
Okay, we should be switching over in a second here. And I'm going to turn the mic off. We should be switching over in a second here. I'm going to turn the mic off. Thank you for your comments. Guys, that's the way I like to preach. And I'm going to touch on Yom Kippur with some of the same concepts. But what I'm being impressed with is the need to preach the gospel to ourselves. And we have different heart needs. And so we need to, based on how we're created, what type of person we are, we need to preach the gospel to ourselves. And so I'm being very impressed with that. Thank you, Ben. It was my pleasure. Tomorrow night, I've got something else called Why I Am a Christian. I gave that at a Muslim conference. What's a nice Jewish boy like me wanting to be a Christian for? And we'll end up talking about the beauty and elegance of the Christian worldview through that message. You're getting to hear me preach. Usually you get to hear me teach. And so this is kind of a fun other way for you guys to hear the connection between my preaching and teaching, and they are very connected, but they're also different. And you can also see what I'm passionate about. Now you learned about my childhood, probably more than you needed to, right? With my grandfather and how that all came. I can go back to the wedding pictures, and I'll do that in just a second or two. Maybe we can end with that slideshow. But I'm weird. I know that there are a lot of ways that, I was kind of taught I'm supposed to preach the gospel. That's when I get excited, when I can make the connections. And I could talk about Jesus in terms of all the great pictures in God's great story that leads to him. That's tomorrow night, and I'm getting that set up. Now I'm going to try and experiment and schedule it through Restream and have it stream to the appropriate place on YouTube. So I hope that works, and I'll try to formulate a plan B to make sure that if that doesn't, I can quickly switch over. So hang with me, but I'm excited about tomorrow night. Let me go to the pictures. I can keep talking, but I want to go to those pictures. I know you guys saw them, but I want Elizabeth to see them. By the way, Elizabeth, nice tour of the path. Elizabeth put up a thing going to the beach in Australia. Now I'm going to show my ignorance. I did not know that where you lived in Australia was near the coast. So that's how silly I am. I really don't know much about Australia at all. Now, the wedding pictures do show some things like that. I wore the talit and I transferred it to Jordan during the ceremony. Sorry about that. Isn't that cool? My girls can stand on walls. There are a few pictures here that just would not work the way I wanted them to. But you can see the canopy. And when we get to the beginning, the canopy will be straight up. There's the canopy that they were married under with the talit. Um, I will have more wedding pictures, but we had to process what we had. So I hope to have more, and I hope to get a few pictures for my daughter. She had a professional photographer. We were limited, and most of these were taken during the rehearsal, as not to stand in front and block anyone because this was live streamed. And so I will make more of those available. This is just a nosh. This is a nosh of wedding pictures. Okay? And I just wanted to show you the canopy and the talit that they're under. I thought that was really neat. And then my transfer, and this is Pastor Ron. So it isn't the actual wedding pictures because they have those. But we will get those out, and so that'll be something I can share. But I do want you to see Daddy walking his daughter down the aisle with a Jewish prayer shawl because that was an incredible moment for me. This is my first daughter to get married. I've officiated at my son's. In this one, I only explained the Jewish customs. So this is my first little girl to get married, and so I'm. This is a different thing, and it felt different. Uh, but I kept my cool. I think my wife was getting a little moist-eyed. I think I was like so worried I was going to lock my knees and pass out or something that I didn't. So that's what that looks like. I will get better pictures. And I'll get actual pictures for the wedding. I hope in just a little bit as those are made available, and then I will be able to share some of those. Nate asked whether I've seen The Chosen. Yes. Do I get a little weepy at the end? Um, Yes, I do. I thank you. By the way, just so that you know, no water was turned to wine. It's a pretty conservative church, just to let you kind of know that. It's fun to share them with you. You guys have been in on it, and so now you know, and so this is kind of really cool. And we'll get better, and hopefully they won't be weirded. Um, so that is the way that goes. Um, Tomorrow night, I'm setting things up. I will post things. There are no PowerPoints, there are no infomercials. But here's what I will do I will make the PowerPoint from tonight available. I know it wasn't available with the thing because I can't create a video of the actual PowerPoint very well with the sound. Um, but I may be able to, in the future, do cool things like that. So we will work on that, and you will hear why I am a Christian, not so much just in terms of my testimony, but what the Christian worldview means to me and what it offered me that really the rabbis couldn't in some areas. And so that'll be neat. Uh, and Elizabeth was sharing about her experience. Um, I'm sorry your dad couldn't be there for that event. My wife's dad was not there when me and Marlene got married. So her grandfather did the honors, and I understand that. Well, I'm going to pull away. I think me and the kids are going to sit. We're still kind of getting over things. But thank you for joining me for a very Jewish take on a parsha, a portion of Torah, and tying that to the gospel. It worked well in Brooklyn, and if it plays in Brooklyn, maybe it could play anywhere, right? And welcome to A Jewish Guy Gives the Gospel in a very Jewish way through a Torah portion. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all tonight. This is set up so that when I stop the stream, things are going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to take just a minute and throw the credits out there. We're getting more folks, and so I'm happy to see that. And Elizabeth says, wow, similar. And that is probably true. So, Excellent. You can still hear me and the music. Wow. We're definitely there. I'm blending. I'm learning sound blending. This is cool. So I'm going to probably say good night. Got a little more sleep last night, and we'll continue to get that. You guys are phenomenal supporters, and I'm seeing God do things and open some new doors, and I'm excited about it. The meeting with the church elders went well, and that was good. I met with some church elders to tell them what I do and why I do it. Thank you, Nate. You are throwing up, and even the Chosen People link. Nate, you're incredible. I love it. So Nate is throwing that up. I'm so excited. And see there, if you were getting money for being nice, Nate, you just earned yourself, a couple $100 just by throwing those up there. But since I'm on a limited ministry budget, you're just going to have to take the verbal praise because that's where things are at. So, God bless.